Welcome to PD Connect, connecting the Parkinson's community with resources, information, and each other.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of PD Connect. We're joined today by Seth Manthey. Seth is an avid supporter of the Michael J. Fox Foundation through Team Fox. He's going to talk to us about his connection to Parkinson's and his current fundraising challenge called 13 for 30. We're going to chat about the benefits of becoming part of a community like Team Fox and explore how each of us has the opportunity to do something epic in the battle against Parkinson's in our own unique way. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get to it. Welcome, Seth.
Hi, guys.
Thanks for joining us, Seth. Let's start off, if you would, by sharing your connection with the Parkinson's community.
Yeah, so I have a number of connections. Obviously, Tanya and Chad, you guys are one of them, but sort of my directly personal connection is that my mom's father, so my grandfather on my maternal side, he had Parkinson's my entire life. And when I was, 25-ish, when he passed away. No, it wasn't even that. Anyways, not the point. He passed away in 2007. Not necessarily, obviously, from Parkinson's, a lot of it old age, but he had lived with Parkinson's my entire life. And so I had really never known him any other way. And so to me, he was just grandpa, but that is really my sort of personal connection. But, you know, I've obviously met people through different activities, different walks of life. I now have a few more personal connections. My third grade teacher has recently developed Parkinson's or been diagnosed with Parkinson's. And obviously she, I grew up in a pretty small town, so we all sort of know each other. And, I was one of the first people she sort of reached out to and talked about Parkinson's with. And then there's a few other people that I know locally who are living with it.
How did you first get involved in the Parkinson's community?
So I first got involved, I think it was about 2012. I was doing a bunch of stuff. I was in graduate school and I was trying to find a way to sort of give back and do things outside of the school setting. And I had recently really started picking up running and was doing more running and just trying to find things to occupy my time. And I was like, well, I can do more with this. And so about 2012, I discovered the Michael J. Fox Foundation and particularly their grassroots community fundraising program, Team Fox. And through that, I was, looking for different races or different runs to do. And I couldn't really find one that I wanted. And so I just said, well, here's a fundraising page. Let's use it. And I committed to running, I think that time it was the Disney Marathon in 2014 as a fundraiser for the Michael J. Fox Foundation. So I was playing with it for a little bit, but that first real commitment to being involved in actively fundraising was the Walt Disney World Marathon in 2014 with Team Fox.
It's interesting. We'll talk about this in a few minutes, but my first involvement with Team Fox was also a Disney race. And Tanya, I think your first at least run with Team Fox was a Disney race as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and the same Disney Marathon weekend. Before we get into a little bit more about your running background and your connection to Team Fox, Seth, I want to talk about your current challenge, which is called, as I mentioned, 13 for 30. And I'll share with our listeners who, some of whom may not be involved with Team Fox, around the Team Fox community, particularly among the runners, if you will, and some of the other people who pursue athletic endeavors in connection with Team Fox. There's a phrase that's been circulated recently, do epic shit. And I think that the 13 for 30 challenge that you've undertaken fits the definition well of doing epic shit. So tell our listeners a little bit about that challenge.
Yeah, and sort of a fun little backstory about the phrase do epic shit. It actually came from, a fantastic individual in the Team Fox community. His name's Brett Parker. He did something that, when all you guys will understand what I'm doing in a little bit, but what Brett did, I think, is absolutely insane. Brett did 7 marathons in 7 days on 7 continents, all while living with Parkinson's disease. So when we say do epic shit, that is the goal. That is, for me, I look at that as the ultimate epic shit that somebody did.
And we're gonna have. I'm sorry. We're gonna have Brett on the show. We're gonna have to have Brett on the show at some point, because you're absolutely right. What we followed his, 7 days of 7 marathons on 7 continents, and it was
worldly epic.
It really was. It was incredible, and that's one of many stories of people involved with Team Fox that are just incredibly inspiring. It's that's one of the things you and I were talking about off air, Seth, is that these. You become a part of this community and you get to know the Team Fox members, and you start to see the different ways they challenge themselves, whether they have Parkinson's or not, and what it inspires you to do and to go out and take on your own personal, incredible challenges, whatever they may be.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I remember seeing Brett not too long after he did that. And, he's like, the first tattoo, he's on the New York bar. The first tattoo he ever got was in remembrance of that sort of race series that he did, which is pretty crazy. So
Tanya is smiling right now because our listeners obviously can't see this, but Tanya has a Team Fox tattoo on her arm, which she got on her. Was that your first Disney marathon?
It was
weekend?
After we ran the Disney half marathon.
That's right. It was after,
and we had already run the New York City marathon.
Her one and only tattoo is the Team Fox logo on the inside of her arm. So we got off track for a second. Let's go back to tell our listeners what 13 for 30 is.
Yeah. So 13 for 30 was one of these things that I thought of, as I was sitting on the train with my commute, trying to figure out, what's my next fundraising challenge. I've run a number of marathons with Team Fox. I've run a number of half marathons with Team Fox. I've done the Dopey Challenge 3 times with Team Fox, which, for those listeners who don't necessarily know what the Dopey Challenge is, it's a series of 4 races at Walt Disney World, where you build up from a 5K to a 10K to a half marathon to a full marathon, sort of back to back to back to back. I've run ultra marathons. I've done all of that stuff, but I was like, so what's the next challenge? What's the next thing where, for me as a fundraiser, I feel like people would be willing to support because they think it's absolutely crazy. So naturally I go, well, how many days in a row can I run? And I'm like, I could do a mile a day for a year. That's not that crazy. I think I pace more than that in my classroom as I'm teaching. So I sort of challenged myself, and I was like, well, let's see if I can run a half marathon every single day for an entire month. And so I thought of this probably actually about September of last year. And I stewed on it and talked to my wife about it a little bit. She looked at me like I'm crazy, but that's not unusual. And I stewed on it a little more, and I was like, this is what I want to do. And so I announced it in, I think, February or so. And the amount of you're crazy, you're insane, but with such a positive, excitement about it was really fun. And so for the past, I think it's the 22nd of September today, for the past 22 days, I've been running a half marathon every day. I actually finished my one for today not too long ago. And, there's 8 more to go, and I've run a marathon every day for the month of September.
And how many miles have you logged at this point?
So I'm at, I think, about 200 and roughly 280, 290, somewhere in there.
Oh, wow. Just 290, huh?
Mm-hmm. Which, to be fair, the most miles I've ever run in a single month, sort of historically, has ever been, I think, about 140.
Wow. That's a big jump.
That's impressive.
It's a big jump. So far, it's pretty fun. I've had plenty of time to think, to prep for class, to design new curriculum, to, contemplate just the world, but then also, spend that time thinking about all the different people who I'm running for, think of those memories of my grandfather that I have, including the time he threw a wet tennis ball at me when we were playing baseball and I cried.
Good
I was
times.
like 5. Let's be honest. I got wet. It was not fun.
You mentioned a minute ago, your wife looked at you like you were crazy, which is not unusual. And one of the things I was thinking about in when you undertake a challenge like this is that it doesn't just affect you, it also affects your loved ones, those around you, those in your household who have to make adjustments and support you. Do you want to talk maybe for a minute about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, trust me, we had some nice long conversations on whether or not this could actually happen, what it's going to look like, how does it work with our schedule. I mean, we have a 2-year-old son. I have a 2-year-old son, and so making sure that I'm doing my part in the parenting side and making sure I can get everything done with work. It's like anything. It's that ultimate teamwork that comes down to it. And your biggest cheerleader is your family. Your biggest supporter is your family. And so making sure too that they're not just supporting you, but that you in turn are supporting them for supporting you. It just becomes this big feedback loop, but always making sure that, you're sort of in lockstep and paying attention to what's going on, even when you're undertaking this stuff, is so important. And I think about it a lot. And I was thinking about it actually today when I was running. It's a big sacrifice. And I mean, for my case, it's a big sacrifice of, I run, takes me about 2 hours, but then I have to get ready, I have to shower, I have to get back and forth. So it's about a 3-hour commitment. And it's about a 3-hour commitment every day that, it's 3 hours extra. My wife's doing solo with our son, which is, no problem, but 3 hours every single day, it's a lot of time. And, I think about the time it takes, particularly for somebody who's a care partner. I don't particularly like the term caregiver, but a care partner for somebody living with Parkinson's. And 3 hours sometimes isn't all it is. Sometimes it's more, some days it's less, but that concern is always there. And that thought is always there of, well, what more can I do? And so, I'm thankless for my wife's ability to support me and be supportive of me. And just having the opportunity to do something like this, and sort of am really thankful for what it sort of looks like on our end when I can think of so many people. I mean, Chad, you're a fantastic example of just the role of the significant other in the life of a Parkinson's family.
You went the same place that I did when I was thinking of the sacrifice and the commitment that your wife has to make to this process, because I also thought about how that reminded me of care partners. And I, like you, I'm not a huge fan of the term caregiver. I'm not even nuts about care partner. I think as I tell people, I'm a husband. But I was thinking about how that does remind me of the role of a care partner with their spouse or their loved one living with Parkinson's, and also that in the Parkinson's community that does extend beyond just the families who have Parkinson's, but also to those who are avid supporters who engage in major fundraising efforts that take months of preparation, because maybe one family member has a connection to Parkinson's, but then the whole family becomes involved and supports it, and it doesn't work without their support. And that to me is one of the amazing things that you see as you get immersed into the Team Fox community, is you see all of these families who work so hard to support the endeavors of one or more member who are passionate about raising awareness or fundraising for the Parkinson's community. That's one of the things that's had the biggest impact on me, because sometimes, as you know, you go to the Team Fox MVP dinner, and there's families that the whole family, I mean the extended family, is involved in fundraising. It's not just the nuclear household.
Absolutely. But I think it's funny that you say extended family when we think about this, because I feel like, especially with the Team Fox community, that extended family definition gets a little bit looser. I mean, I know even down there in Orlando where you guys are, there's not just what you guys would probably call your extended Team Fox family, that none of them are related to you, but you guys are all there volunteering at each other's events. You're supporting each other's events. You're promoting each other's events. You're going on just runs together. You create that extended network, not just for fundraising, but just for life. And, everyone's there in every way, shape, or form. So when you say extended family, it's not by marriage. It's not by blood. It's not by anything. It's just by caring, which is crazy to think.
It made me think of, Seth, when you were just mentioning how we get together and support each other's fundraisers. When Jimmy was on American Ninja Warrior, how we all went on a run to support him, and we acted out our own American Ninja Warrior training on the local children's playground set.
Yeah, I remember seeing that photo from you guys. That's one of the more entertaining photos I saw of people and how they were coming together to support other members of the community.
And for those of our listeners who may not know, Jimmy is Jimmy Choi, who has participated 2 years now on American Ninja Warrior and is continuing his pursuits, and is an incredible inspiration to not just the Parkinson's community, but the Parkinson's community and beyond, and a good friend of all of ours. Seth, you mentioned earlier we've talked a couple times about the Disney Marathon weekend, and you mentioned the Dopey Challenge. This is a good opportunity and you were also talking about how, spouses every once in a while kind of look at each other like, oh, that's a crazy idea. So allow my wife now to share her recent crazy idea for our household.
Seth, I can hear you laughing. So
It's so fun.
Well, let's just say how this all really began. So I got roped into doing the New York City Marathon after we ran the Disney Half Marathon. Chad goes, oh, actually, no, it was after we ran the Disney 10K in 2017. Chad goes, I said, let's do the half marathon next. He's like, okay, well, let's do even better. Let's do the New York City Marathon. I had not even run a half marathon at this point. And in November this past year, I was running the New York City Marathon. And then I thought, well, I ran the New York City Marathon. Then we ran the Disney Half Marathon this past January. And then I said, next we're doing the Dopey Challenge. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And after some persuasion from other Team Fox members, local, who said, well, if you don't, I'll run with her. And Chad's like, oh, no.
Yes, there is a local Team Fox, part of our family, our extended family, who knew exactly what button to push and said, well, I mean, if you're not willing to run the Dopey Challenge with her, I'll run it with her. And that was about all the peer pressure it took. And the next thing you know, I was committed to the Dopey Challenge.
Because this person has Parkinson's.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly. So anyway, that is in addition to that, we'll share that we're also training for New York again. We're running a half marathon tomorrow. So locally as part of our training. And
our commitment to your 13 for 30.
Right. You're doing 30. We're doing 1 this month. How about that, Seth?
Hey, you guys aren't the only ones running tomorrow. There's a big crew up in Chicago. Chicago half is tomorrow. Talked to those guys a little bit yesterday. They were all out at dinner, and so they all said they're running with me in time and space. They're running with me tomorrow, and so you guys are too. So it'll be a good day to run tomorrow and feel the love and the energy from everyone as I'm out there slogging away.
Well, hopefully we'll feel the love and the energy. I know we'll certainly feel the heat.
Yeah.
It is a little toasty down here right now.
To say the least.
Hey, Seth,
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask you is you've run, I don't know, well, actually you can share. How many marathons have you run at this point?
I don't count, but I'd say 7 or 8, somewhere in there.
All right, and a whole bunch of half marathons, obviously, including this month.
Yeah, whole bunch of halves. I think halves are probably in the 15 to whatever range, 15 to 20.
It's a good distance.
It's my favorite distance, so it sort of helps that I'm doing this. It's the one where I feel like you can go fast and you can push yourself, but you don't necessarily have to risk death as much. Not that you'll necessarily die running a marathon, but there's this weird mental block I have on that ability to push myself in those sort of miles 18 to 24.
Well, you having personally witnessed last year the New York City Marathon, know that while I may not have come close to death, I certainly thought I was going to die at some point. And I can even recall you at one point, I looked at you and said, I'm struggling. And you said, I can see that. But
Yeah, so this was what, mile 20, 25-ish when I was out there cheering for you guys. And, it was dark and Tanya's just there, just cruising along. Chad, you're just like, she's going to finish before me. She's
oh
like,
no,
you were ready just to lay down there on the sidewalk and tap out. But,
I
Tanya
let me tell
pulling you
you,
along.
I never thought of tapping out, but only because, and I've said this to Tanya several times, only because I never went into it with the mindset that quitting was an option. If I had gone into it with the mindset that quitting was an option, I probably would have tapped out. I will, in my own defense, share, I also had plantar fasciitis, which wasn't exactly helping,
That was the problem.
but Tanya kicked my butt, and I'm okay with that. She was cruising. Let me ask you, with all the races you've done, what has been your favorite race so far?
So my favorite race, what distance do we want to talk?
Well, you pick. I mean, you don't have to stick to one. You could share more than
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. So my individually, sort of my personal favorite race is the Walt Disney World Wine and Dine Half Marathon when it used to be at nighttime. That is both my PR, and that was in 2015, I think. No, 2014 Wine and Dine Half Marathon. It was pouring down rain, absolutely freezing. It was fantastic. I had so much fun. Favorite personal race. Most enjoyable marathon probably would be, I love Chicago. I'd run Chicago before I'd run New York again. But for the story of the day would probably be the New York City Marathon. When I ran it in 2015, I ran alongside Jimmy Choi for miles 8 through 26.2. And we just had fun. There was, sort of he had the benefit at one point of the symptom of Parkinson's of a smell loss. For me, he was confused as to why I sprinted away from him for a little bit because we were stuck behind some guys for a while. He didn't know what was going on. They didn't exactly smell great, and so I sprinted away.
That's funny.
But probably my favorite and absolutely truly favorite race, and there's a lot of story that I'll sort of have to tell with this, was the first time I ran the Rock the Ridge Ultra Marathon with Team Fox. And so what that is it's a 50-mile race, just about 2 hours outside New York City. Big trail race, tons of fun, pretty family-friendly sort of race. You have 24 hours to complete it. So there were people hiking it, there were people running it. But for me, I ran alongside two different teams, and these teams were, so you can run it not only as an individual, but you could run it as a relay, sort of divided across 3 or 4 people. And I ran alongside two of the teams, both teams made up of people living with Parkinson's. A lot of these people I'd never really met before. I sort of talked to them sort of online through that Team Fox community, but I never really met a lot of them. And we all were like, yeah, let's just get a big Airbnb. There were 13 of us in a house together. So not only were we getting ready to run an ultra marathon, relay or not, we were all in a house together, and like breakfast, lunch, let's go run a race, call it some fun. But I remember sort of as we're running it, just stepping back and being quiet and letting these groups of people, because they stuck together for the most part. So there were always two people with Parkinson sort of running together, just, and I was there with them, not for any reason, but just because I wanted to sort of run alongside these guys. And I had my GoPro, I was snapping photos and just having fun with it. And I remember stepping back and just listening to people tell their stories. And I think anytime you give people the platform to tell their stories and you take the time to listen, it'll be one of the most impactful things you can ever experience, let alone, in this case, people with Parkinson's being able to connect to somebody who is also going through similar things, not quite the same, because as we all know, not everyone has Parkinson's sort of the exact same. You've met one person with Parkinson's every time you meet somebody. But just listening to them tell their stories about, what medications they've tried, what the side effects have been. Those were some of the entertaining stories, but, some of the struggles that they go through and things like that. And I remember for the last leg, so we were at mile 37 or so, somewhere in that window, 37, 40, and working our way from that last leg. One of the teams, somebody had really started to cramp up and just was tired, general fatigue. And so one of the other teams just carried on and kept going. And so I stuck with sort of that back team, and I stayed with them. We were all running together. We hit that last leg, that last transition point, and all the other team members for that relay team joined in. So suddenly it was, everyone who had run the first leg, second leg, third leg, we were all there together. And we were all sort of running that last leg together. And again, just that same sort of conversation was flowing, that same sort of moment was going. And I remember, and I have this photo, it's one of my favorite photos. I remember seeing this photo or seeing this opportunity as we're running this big, long, straight stretch towards this big stone archway, which is both the start and the finish. And there was an opportunity to, all of us, myself included, to cross the finish line with all of these guys together. And they're all like, okay, let's go. And they're all, they're grabbing hands and everything like that. And I take the moment and I step back. I physically removed myself from that situation just to watch it, just to be able to be behind them, not part of their story, not part of that journey, because the journey wasn't about me. So being able to witness that, and along the side, there's just, Team Fox staff, people had finished the race, people were just waiting, family members, they're all screaming, they're all cheering, and they're just running, and they have the finish line. And so, there's somebody who got the photo of these guys from the front, but I have a photo of them from the back, and I can tell what their faces looked like just even from that photo. I couldn't see them, but I could see that. And so, having that story and the story associated with that race, that's sort of my favorite race because of that, just like that final 200 meters.
That's amazing.
Yeah, you really, you can't see it obviously, but you really moved Tanya with that story. And we talk a lot we talk some on this podcast about the importance of community, and obviously the whole name of the podcast, PD Connect, and the message behind it is all about connecting the Parkinson's community, because that sense of community is so important. And one of the things you and I talked about before we went on the air was how we first met, and kind of how that ties in with the significance of the Team Fox community, and how, even if we have listeners who've had no involvement, whether it's through Team Fox or otherwise, have had no involvement with fundraising or getting behind any particular organization, how taking that first step, what an impact it can have over the long run, and what a difference it can make in your life. And so if you would just kind of start that conversation off, share with our listeners what you remember about how you and I first met.
So this was 2016. I was running the Dopey Challenge, which means 5K, 10K, half marathon, full marathon. I was on day 2. So that means it's 10K day. Standing in a parking lot. If you've ever run a Disney race, you start in a parking lot, you finish in a parking lot, but you're standing there at 3:00 in the morning with a whole bunch of other runners. Everyone's cold most of the time. And all of a sudden this guy, sort of barrel-chested guy comes up wearing a Team Fox jersey. He's like, "Hi, I'm Chad." "Hi, Chad. Nice to meet you." And he just, be a little honest, just keeps talking at me. I'm sort of in the zone, ready to run my 10K, still tired from the 5K, had some fun on the 5K, still sort of focused. And you could tell there was just nervous jitters going on. And I hadn't quite, figured out what was going on. And I could tell, and we just kept talking. He's like, oh yeah, this is my first 10K that I can ever really remember. And I was like, oh, that sort of explains it.
It wasn't just my first 10K. And by the way, that wasn't meant to be an invitation to pick on co-host Chad here, but who we're now talking about in the third person. But this was my first organized race, period. And that's important because I think to share with everyone, because it was the first step for me, and then later on turned into Tanya taking that first step down the road to becoming involved in running or athletic endeavors as part of our Team Fox fundraising. And just to give the backstory, we met Rose and Chris Babcock, who run the Pints for Parkinson's here in Orlando. We met them in November or October or November. They were doing a small fundraiser, kind of almost promoting their major fundraiser, which is in April. And they were doing the small fundraiser, and somebody sent me a text and said, hey, I just saw something on social media about these Pints for Parkinson's people are going to be at this local craft brewery, and you should swing by there today. And it was literally on our way home. So we swing by, we walk in. It's a similar situation to when you and I met. We walk in and immediately start talking and announce ourselves and say, hey, we're involved in Team Fox. And Rose and Chris were like, that's great. And we've been fast friends ever since. But one of the things we asked, they started throwing out all these names of people that they knew and that were involved. This person, that person. I'm sure one of those names was Seth. And we said, well, how do you know all these people? And they said, we did Disney last year. Well, what do you mean you did Disney? Well, we ran during the Disney Marathon weekend, and they start telling us all about it. And they said, you got to do Disney. There's probably still spots available. So on the way home, Tanya and I are talking about it. And I was like, I could do a 5K. I mean, I'd been running just a little bit at that point with a guy I was training with, but I had literally, up until I would say September of that year, hadn't run a mile since high school. Literally hadn't run a mile since high school. Thankfully, it started running just a little bit with a buddy of mine. And so I thought, okay, I can do a 5K, 3 miles, no problem. So I go to sign up within a couple weeks after that. Maybe it was less than a week. And it's, well, sorry, there's no 5K spots available. What do you have available? We have a 10K. And I said, okay, I'll figure out a way to make it work. And so you're right. I was nervous that day, that morning for sure about, running a 10K. I had not run at that point a 10K distance. I think the furthest I'd run in my training was probably 4 miles. But that experience was incredible. I mean, it was truly incredible. And what it meant to me and what it meant to Tanya and what she understood from that about my commitment to her and how that was, we were already involved in fundraising, but that put us on a completely different path in terms of people we connected with over the course of that weekend. And in subsequent races, it led us to do something I never would have fathomed, the New York City Marathon. And being a part of that experience, whether it was painful for me or not, the truth is it was incredible. And the way we've connected with others and the way that, going back to what we were talking about earlier, the way that meeting other members of the Team Fox community and seeing them do epic shit. And what's epic for one person, is different for someone else. Like Seth, you and I talked off the air that what's epic for you is doing, 13 miles for 30 straight days. What was epic for me at the beginning was doing a 10K. What was epic for Tanya and I as of November of last year was doing a marathon. It changes. And Jimmy Choi has talked in some of his speaking engagements about how what members of the Parkinson's community, whether you're the person living with it or a caregiver or a family member or someone else who wants to be involved in supporting someone, you pick something for yourself that moves you and that moves the people who are close to you and that you can connect with and become passionate about. And you go do that, whatever it is, whether it's running a mile, whether it's running a 5K, whether it's walking a 5K. But, go do that and have that moment and that experience. And that can be the catalyst to really becoming bigger, more connected. I'm sorry, not bigger, but more connected to the Parkinson's community.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So sort of a backstory. I'm a high school science teacher, and I always want my kids to be able to walk away with this idea of you can do more, you can commit more, you can understand more, and you can make a difference. And I think it's that willingness to, one, put yourself out there so other people can feel like they can connect with you, but also being willing to share your story, be open with people, and be available to be connected with, that I think is so important. And that for me, even before a 5K or a 10K or whatever you're going to do, that's the first step, is being willing to go out there, share your story, be who you are, and find the thing you just care about. Again, for me, it's running. I care about running. I think it's a fun way for me to, one, stay fit, but two, show a dedication to a cause, a mission, an organization. Because, 393 miles that I'll have done by the end of this, that's it. Well, I'll be honest, it doesn't feel great, but it's a commitment. Sometimes you have to sort of suffer through it, and you do it for a reason, and it's because you care about it. If you don't care about it, you're not going to do it. So you got to find that thing that you really care about, that you'll chase, you'll pursue, and you'll push for. And if that thing is becoming a master baker to have the best bake sale you can for a fundraiser, go for it. If it is, taking that first step to go a run around the block, go for it. Someone somewhere will be inspired by you and be willing to support you in whatever it is. And, I think that's one of the lessons I've learned sort of in life about, especially as I've become more and more involved with, sort of the nonprofit world and the fundraising world, that there's sort of someone somewhere is going to be inspired and be willing to support you in some way, shape, or form. You just have to put yourself out there and share your story.
Absolutely. And as you were talking about that, I was thinking about not only the participants in the races and their and their involvement and the way they inspire, but also those who come out to watch and cheer and allow themselves to be inspired. And one of the things I would encourage our listeners to do, if you're not involved in Team Fox or any other organization, if in your area there are Parkinson's walks or runs, or if there are Team Fox events, other organizations too, that are participating in runs similar to the Disney races or New York or Chicago, go out and cheer, connect with an organization and go out and be a part of their cheering section and allow yourself to connect and to be inspired, because that's what, honestly, that's what got us into New York and then into Disney, and who knows what else it'll get us into, because we, running the 10K, that first Disney weekend for me in, what year was that? 2016. That was significant, but perhaps even more significant was staying over the course of the weekend and watching and cheering on people like Jimmy Choi, people like you, people like so many others who are involved, who challenge themselves, whether it's the Dopey or the half marathon and the marathon or whatever their personal challenge is, and watching them take that on. And the next thing you know, I'm turning to somebody and saying, at Team Fox, what do you have next? We got a New York half and a Chicago and half in DC. And I said, I love New York. And so I signed up for the half. And then Tanya comes out and she's watching and seeing all this, and it ultimately inspires her to start running again. And so it just cascades into this. It just builds into something that's so positive, and you just continue to connect more and more. And I think that's so important.
Yeah, one of we talk about being the sort of the cheerleader on the side, or the big supporter on the side. Some of my favorite moments don't come from running. Like, I'll be honest, like as a runner, I love the running part, but I have so much more fun cheering. I am usually laid out more exhausted cheering than I am from running.
I think it's.
Because
Oh, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say. I think cheering is because you're out there for a long time, just like the athletes are. You know, the participants in the races. But you're cheering, and you get to see and experience the emotion that they're experiencing when they run by, and they
Mm-hmm.
see you cheering, and then it motivates them, and it's motivating for you, because for me as a person with Parkinson's, watching people go out and run these races was so moving to me, and especially to see Chad push his limits, because I wasn't able to watch him run the 10K, but was there for the New York City half. And when he ran up to, I think it was mile 7 marker, where we were cheering for him, and I could just see the look on his face, and it just moved me to tears, because I was like, he's doing this for me.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it takes a it's a big commitment. So cheering is fun because you get to experience many different aspects of it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think about the times I've cheered and I've moved further down the race. I get emotionally invested in people.
Yes.
Like, you're a random stranger. You're not even connected to the cause I care about, but I saw you there. You look like you're struggling there. When I get to my next cheer station, I hope to see you again, and I'm going to cheer even louder for you. Like, that sort of excitement, and then let alone when you see somebody who's connected to any cause, it gives you more reason to see how passionate people are about finding something, or have people who have found something that they care deeply about, let alone if it's the same one that you care deeply about. You start committing fully to that cheering and that sort of emotional investment, and seeing how many people are out there either supporting themselves, supporting a loved one, sharing their story, and being willing to put themselves out there publicly, because usually you're wearing a brightly colored jersey with a big logo on it saying, hey, I'm raising money for myself, for this person, for whoever. And it's a powerful thing to sort of watch and observe and be part of.
Absolutely. And that's the amazing thing about the running community, and that you start, once you get involved, you start to see. And it's when you start down this road of becoming involved in the Parkinson's community, and Tanya, I've talked about this several times. So much of the journey with Parkinson's is about a sense of community. It might start with your Team Fox family, and then it's the Parkinson's community as a whole. It's your local community and the way that they support what you're doing, or your fundraisers, or your events you participate in. It becomes the running community if you get involved in running. All these different communities that you connect with, and that it's just, I don't know, it's an amazing thing to be a part of.
And even though you're not running a race, like, I am so inspired by, and I'm so appreciative of you and your family sacrifice for letting you do this 13 for 30, because I know it's a huge sacrifice, and I appreciate everything you do for the Parkinson's community. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I do it because I care deeply about it, from both my personal connection, obviously with my grandfather, the people I know here in the community, but it's quote unquote easy to go out there every day when, I know people like you, Tanya, people like Jimmy Choi, anyone else we can really name in the Parkinson's community. I know a big breadth of people, sort of from past experiences as a Team Fox member myself, connecting with people and sort of engaging with people. I am part of that sort of extended family for a lot of people. They're part of mine. And so it's, again, quote unquote, easy to go out there. And for me, it's a little crazy to think about, as much like physical, whatever I'm putting myself through, I get to, I have 2 hours of it, that's the regimen that I sort of have to follow for this is, it's going to be short lived. I'm only doing it for 30 days. It's a weird sort of thing to think about. So I think about, obviously that sacrifice for myself, for my family, but we sort of get to walk away from it at the end, in sort of a different sort of sense than, people who are, supporting or actively living with or caring for Parkinson's. It's there. It's there 365 days a year. I have 30. So 30 days is nothing. So I don't even balk at the idea of doing this for 30 days because, again, 30 days and, don't ask me to do 31 though. I'm not. 31, we're done on 31.
Well, Seth, we really appreciate it. I think this is a good place for us to wrap up. We've enjoyed the chance to talk with you. Appreciate your sharing both your background with Parkinson's and the Parkinson's community, and also this latest challenge of yours. I can't wait to see what you have next. I won't ask you what that is yet because you probably need a little recovery time before you decide on the next epic challenge.
Hey, Seth, before we let you go, can you tell us or tell our listeners how they can support your 13 for 30?
Yeah, so if you go to teamfox.org, you can find myself on there if you go to the donate to a fundraiser search, and you can just look up Seth Manthey, or you can look up 13 for 30. You can come up, you'll see me on there, and you can make a donation that way. If I'm sure you guys will, you can email, PD Connect, you can email Tanya and Chad, and they can directly share that link. If you're on Instagram, I'm on Instagram. It's just Seth Manthey, and then my link for a donation is in the bio. That'll probably stay up there through the end of the year. So even when I'm done running, you can still jump in and support.
And we'll put the link in, probably link to the website, and also maybe the link to the Team Fox page in the description for this podcast, but also so our listeners will know if they do decide to just go to Team Fox and look you up. It's Seth, S-E-T-H, and Manthey is M-A-N-T-H-E-Y. So Seth, thanks again for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thanks for tuning in for this episode of PD Connect. Please help us connect with the Parkinson's community by spreading the word about this podcast. You can find us online at pdconnect.org and on Facebook at PD Connect Podcast. You can also follow us on Twitter at PD_Connect. Again, that's PD_Connect. Until next time, this is Chad and Tanya signing off.